Good evening, family. I don't know what storm you've been weathering. I don't know what lie whispered its way into your spirit. But tonight, I came to tell you that faith is not a feeling. Faith is not a warm, fuzzy moment during worship. Faith is not just a Sunday morning experience. Faith is a fight. See, some of us were taught to treat faith like it's fragile, like it needs to be protected from our pain. But can I tell you the truth? Faith was built for the storm. Faith was designed for your wilderness. It doesn't grow when everything's perfect. It grows when the winds of doubt and fear try to knock you over. And somehow you're still standing. There were moments I looked in the mirror and couldn't see the promise. All I could see was the pain. All I could feel was the fear. But God showed me that doubt is loud, but truth is louder. Doubt said I was broken. Truth said I was chosen. Doubt said I was too far gone. Truth said I was just getting started. And maybe you've been there. Maybe you're there right now, afraid, shaking, smiling on the outside, but screaming in your soul. Can I remind you? Fear may come, but it can't stay. Not when your faith is grounded in a God who never fails. Let me tell you something deep. Your history doesn't scare God. All the failures, the heartbreak, the mistakes, they don't cancel your calling. They clarify it. That divorce didn't disqualify you. That addiction didn't destroy you. That secret you thought disqualified you, it's going to be the very thing God uses to show his glory. Because faith doesn't ignore fear. It confronts it. It walks up to it with trembling hands and says, I'm scared, but I'm going anyway. Faith says, I don't have all the answers, but I have a word. Faith says, I may be walking through fire, but I will not burn. So tonight I dare you to believe again. Not because you're strong, but because he is. Not because you have it all figured out, but because he's never lost a battle. Your doubt is real. Your fear is valid, but your faith is greater. And that's how you overcome. We've been taught to pray. We've been taught to hope. We've been told to just have faith, like it's a decorative accessory we pull out when life is going smoothly. But when the floor drops beneath you, when the phone rings with news that steals your breath, when betrayal comes from the people you trusted most, what does faith look like then? Let me tell you something raw. Faith is not a wish. It's not tossing up a prayer and crossing your fingers that God might hear it. It's not saying God's got it and still walking around bound by fear. No, faith is a weapon. Faith was never meant to be soft. It wasn't designed to be pretty or poetic. It was made for war. It was forged in fire. It's what carried Jesus to the cross and what lifted him out of the grave. Faith isn't passive. It's active. It's movement in the face of paralysis. We confuse wishing with believing. We say we're standing in faith, but we're actually just standing still, hoping something shifts. But faith doesn't wait for the atmosphere to change. Faith changes the atmosphere. It walks into a room filled with fear and calls peace to attention. It steps into a battle bloody and bruised and says, I will not back down. Wishing says, I hope I'll heal. Faith says, by his stripes I am healed. Wishing says, maybe I'll make it out of this. Faith says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You see the difference. Wishing avoids the fight. Faith steps into it. Wishing is timid. Faith is bold. Wishing needs conditions to be right. Faith shows up regardless. And don't get me wrong, faith isn't the absence of fear. Faith is choosing to swing anyway. Even if your knees are shaking, even if your voice trembles, even if the enemy is louder than your confidence. Faith doesn't require a full tank. It just needs a yes. It just needs movement. It just needs one foot in front of the other. Some of us have been stuck because we've been wishing God would do something without realizing he already gave us the sword. And you don't wait to draw a sword. You use it. You speak the word like a weapon. You declare his promises out loud. You remind your soul of what God said, even when your reality tries to argue with it. The enemy doesn't mind your wishful thinking. He's not intimidated by your Pinterest scriptures or your Sunday playlist. But when you pick up real faith, unshakable, desperate, bold faith, that's when hell starts trembling. Because faith doesn't just get you out of situations. Sometimes it keeps you in them long enough to come out stronger. Faith doesn't always rescue. It refines. It sharpens you. It disciplines your mouth, your mindset, your mission. Faith teaches you how to stand, not just shout, to fight, not just flee. It's not about having faith that everything will go the way you want. It's having faith that even if it doesn't, God is still God. Even if the healing doesn't come today, even if the door stays closed, even if the people leave, even if the plan falls apart. Faith says, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Some of you are trying to use wishful thinking to fight spiritual battles, and that's why you're tired. That's why you feel defeated. That's why you keep cycling through the same patterns, because a wish will never break a stronghold. You don't need another maybe. You need a must. You need that down in your bones kind of belief that says this thing has to shift because God said so. You need to wake up with a spiritual grit that tells the enemy, I'm not just hoping I get through this. I'm declaring I already have. That's what makes faith a weapon. It doesn't just react, it initiates. It doesn't just wait, it wages war. It doesn't beg for breakthrough, it stands in authority and commands it. Faith is what told the woman with the issue of blood, if I can just touch the hem. Faith is what told David, this giant isn't too big to fight, he's too big to miss. Faith is what made Peter step out of the boat while everyone else stayed comfortable. Faith doesn't need a consensus. It needs conviction. And sometimes faith feels lonely. Sometimes it means walking in a direction no one else understands. Sometimes it means believing when everything looks broken. But you don't need everything to agree with you. You just need to agree with God. Because when faith becomes your weapon, the enemy loses his. He can't use doubt, fear, or delay to destroy you when you're wielding a word that cuts through every lie. Faith will make you dangerous. Doubt doesn't tiptoe. It crashes in like an unwanted guest, throws its weight around, and settles into your spirit like it pays rent. It doesn't ask for permission. It invades. It questions everything God promised you. It pokes holes in your identity. It feeds off delay, off heartbreak, off anything that looks like silence from heaven. Doubt says, if God really loved you, why did that happen? Doubt says, you must have missed it. You must not be enough. Doubt isn't logical, it's emotional. It attaches itself to your wounds, your insecurities, your waiting seasons. And the worst part, doubt sounds like you. It doesn't show up with horns and red flags. It whispers in your own voice. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because when doubt is loud, it drowns out everything else. It distorts the truth until you start calling lies wisdom and fear discernment. Doubt makes you second guess what you already know. It will have you walking around with a word from God and still wondering if he meant it. That's what happened in the garden. God gave Eve clear truth, but the enemy came in with a question. Just one seed of doubt. Did God really say? That's all it takes. One question, one moment of uncertainty, and suddenly you're spiraling. And don't think you're exempt because you go to church, because you serve, because you know how to quote scripture. The loudest doubt often lives in the most gifted people, the most called, the most anointed. Why? Because the louder your destiny, the louder your doubt will try to be. But here's the thing, truth never competes. It doesn't shout to be heard. It stands. It waits. It is. Truth isn't in a rush to prove itself. It's already proven. You don't need truth to be loud. You just need to get still enough to hear it. Because truth may not be flashy, but it is faithful. It doesn't change with your mood. It doesn't shift with your situation. Truth stays consistent when everything else feels chaotic. And when you start aligning your mind, your mouth, and your heart with truth, doubt doesn't stand a chance. But you have to choose which voice you're going to amplify. Doubt will always have something to say. It will bring evidence. It will point to your failures, your delays, your disappointments. Doubt will play highlight reels of every mistake you've ever made. But faith doesn't need a resume. It needs a revelation. Truth says you are chosen. Doubt says you are overlooked. Truth says you are healed. Doubt says you're still broken. Truth says you're equipped. Doubt says you're in over your head. And the volume of doubt increases when you stop feeding yourself with truth. When you disconnect from God's voice, the enemy's voice sounds more familiar. You can't overcome loud doubt with a silent spirit. You have to speak truth out loud, declare it, war with it, live by it. You can't just think your way out of doubt. You have to speak your way through it. Faith comes by hearing, not by thinking. That's why the enemy wants your mouth shut. That's why he wants you isolated, silent, unsure. Because if you ever start releasing truth into your atmosphere, things start breaking. Jesus didn't just sit in silence when he was tempted. He spoke the word. Every lie the enemy threw, Jesus had a louder truth. It is written. That's how you silence doubt, not by arguing with it, but by overpowering it. You need to start answering your doubt. You need to answer it like you've got backup, like you know who you belong to, like you know who sent you. You need to answer it with truth that's bigger than your current emotions. Because truth doesn't change when your situation does. Truth doesn't shrink in the presence of bad news. Truth doesn't bow to disappointment. It stands. And when you stand on it, you rise above the storm. The most dangerous thing you can do is entertain doubt while neglecting truth. It's like trying to fight a fire with paper. You're feeding what's already trying to burn you down. Doubt grows in darkness, but truth thrives in light. That's why you have to expose the lies you've believed. You can't cast out what you're still cuddling. Sometimes we don't even realize how loud doubt has become until we start trying to move. You take a step toward your purpose and suddenly doubt is screaming. That's not because you're going the wrong way. It's because you're threatening the enemy's plan. The louder the doubt, the closer you are to something divine. But the truth of God is not intimidated by your doubt. It's not fragile. It's not insecure. It will stand with you in your questions. It will anchor you in the unknown. And if you let it, it will guide you out of confusion into clarity. Because truth doesn't need to scream to be heard. It just needs to be received. Fear is a visitor, a relentless one at times. It shows up unannounced, like a shadow creeping in just when you thought you had the light all around you. It's sneaky. It can feel like a heavy weight on your chest, a knot in your stomach, a restless night that won't let you rest. Fear speaks in all kinds of voices, the voice of failure, the voice of rejection, the voice of you're not enough, the voice that tells you to quit before you even start. But here's the truth. Fear is not your home. It's not where you belong. And most importantly, fear cannot stay where faith lives. They cannot coexist in the same room for long. You can't cultivate fear and faith at the same time. They are opposites. When one grows, the other shrinks. Maybe fear has been your constant companion for so long that it feels like family. Maybe it's been the default setting of your mind because you've been hurt, disappointed, or told no too many times. But fear is a liar dressed up as protection. It pretends to keep you safe, but what it really does is keep you stuck. Fear keeps you from walking into your purpose. Fear keeps you from speaking your truth. Fear keeps you from stepping out in faith. Faith, on the other hand, is like a home where fear just can't survive. When faith lives there, fear becomes a stranger. It may knock on the door, but it can't get in. It may raise its voice, but faith has a louder declaration. Faith whispers, God is with me. Faith holds fast to promises even when the night is long and the path is uncertain. Remember the story of Peter stepping out of the boat. He walked on water because his eyes were on Jesus. But the moment he looked at the wind and waves, fear entered and he began to sink. That's how fear works. It distracts you from the one who can hold you up. Fear shifts your focus from the source to the storm. Faith is the exact opposite. It fixes your eyes on the source, not the storm. You have to understand fear will always try to show up. It's part of the human experience. But you get to decide how long it stays. When faith is cultivated deeply, when your trust in God becomes rooted and unshakable, fear loses its power. Faith is the light in the darkness, and fear cannot live in the light. So how do you build a home for faith that pushes fear out? It starts with what you feed your mind and heart. What are you saying to yourself? What scriptures are you holding on to? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Faith grows when you intentionally expose yourself to truth and keep fear at arm's length. It also grows when you remember who God is. Fear wants you to believe that God is far away, silent, or powerless. But faith remembers that God is near, listening, and mighty to save. Faith remembers that God specializes in making a way where there is no way. Faith grows in the moments when you choose to obey even when you don't feel like it. When you step out trembling but trusting. When you say yes to God's call even though the path is unclear. That's when fear starts to retreat because faith is not passive. It moves forward despite the fear. It's important to remember that faith is not about the absence of fear. Many of the heroes in Scripture were afraid. They just refused to let fear dictate their actions. Moses was afraid. David was afraid. Esther was afraid. But their faith was louder than their fear. Faith has a voice that says, I will trust even when I can't see. Fear has a voice that says, I won't step out because I don't know what's next. Faith says, God's promises are true. Fear says, what if they're not? Faith says, I am not alone. Fear says, I am isolated. A fear will tell you all kinds of stories if you let it. It will remind you of every failure, every pain, every disappointment. But faith rewrites the story. It tells you about God's faithfulness, his provision, and his plans for your future. Faith brings peace that surpasses understanding. Fear brings chaos and confusion. The moment you invite faith in, fear has to pack up and leave. Because faith isn't just belief, it's confidence, boldness, and assurance. Faith is a shield, a refuge, a strong tower. And when you stand in that faith, fear has nowhere to hide. The battle between faith and fear is a daily one. Some days fear will be louder. Other days faith will roar back. But faith wins every time when you choose to stand on the promises of God instead of the possibilities of your fears. Sometimes you have to practice faith like a muscle. You have to exercise it, speak it out loud, and remind yourself over and over that fear does not have the final say. You have to choose faith even when it's hard. You have to build that faith house brick by brick, moment by moment. Faith is a sanctuary where fear is unwelcomed. When you learn to live there, you will walk differently. You will speak differently. You will live differently. You will become a testimony of what happens when fear loses its grip and faith takes hold. The power of faith is in its ability to disarm fear. Fear is a bully, but faith is a warrior. Fear is a shadow, but faith is light. Fear tries to paralyze, but faith propels you forward. And that, beloved, is where transformation happens. Sometimes our past feels like a chain wrapped tight around our future. We carry the weight of mistakes, regrets, heartbreaks, and failures like they define us, like they are the headline of our story instead of just a chapter. We look in the mirror and see a history full of scars, wounds, and wrong turns, and we wonder, how can God use this brokenness? How can he write a new ending for me? Let me remind you, your history is not bigger than God's plan. No matter how messy, how painful, how marked by defeat your story seems, it is not bigger than the God who holds your future. God specializes in redemption. He is the master of making beauty out of ashes. Your past might be heavy, but God's purpose is heavier. His plan is bigger. We often get stuck in the trap of believing that what we've done disqualifies us from what God wants to do through us. That the mistakes, the pain, or even the seasons of waiting mean we've missed our chance. But God's word says otherwise. The Bible is filled with stories of people whose pasts looked impossible to overcome, yet God turned their mess into a message, their pain into purpose. Think about Joseph, the one who was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. His history was painful and filled with setbacks. Yet God's plan for Joseph was greater than all of it. He rose from the pit to the palace because his past was not bigger than God's plan. God used every hardship as a step toward his destiny. Or consider Rahab, the woman with a past that society would have condemned, yet God used her to protect his people and place her in the lineage of Jesus. She didn't have to clean up her history first. God met her where she was and said, your past does not define your future. Maybe your history includes addiction, broken relationships, failure in school or career, or years of doubt and fear. Maybe your history feels like a mountain too high to climb. But God is the God of the impossible. His plan is to take what was meant to destroy you and use it to display his glory. You are not your mistakes. You are not your pain. You are not the sum total of your failures. You are a child of the Most High God, created with a purpose, designed for greatness. The moment you start believing that your history is bigger than God's plan, you give up the victory before the battle even starts. I know sometimes the past tries to scream the loudest when you're stepping into your future. When you get a little taste of progress, doubt creeps in. What if I mess up again? What if I'm not really ready? What if this is too much for me? But that's the enemy trying to remind you of your history instead of the hope God has for you. God's plan doesn't erase your past. It redeems it. Redemption means taking broken pieces and making something whole, taking your history with all its flaws and failures and weaving it into a tapestry of triumph. Redemption is God saying, I'm not done with you yet. There's power in knowing that your past does not have the final word. Your failures don't dictate your destiny. The scars you carry are not signs of defeat, but badges of survival. They show you've been through battle and are still standing. God's plan looks beyond your past and fixes its eyes on who you are becoming. Faith is what allows you to see beyond your history to the promise ahead. Faith says, God's plan is bigger than my pain. Faith steps forward knowing that the God who started a good work in you will bring it to completion. Faith doesn't allow your history to be a prison. It uses it as a launching pad. You have to stop apologizing for your past and start partnering with God for your future. Stop believing the lie that you're too broken or too far gone. You're exactly where you need to be right now for God's plan to unfold. Sometimes the detours, the delays, the difficulties are the very things preparing you for your purpose. This is why God's grace is so incredible. It meets you right where you are, regardless of what you've done or where you've been. Grace is God saying, I see your history, but I'm more interested in your destiny. Grace wipes the slate clean and invites you into a future filled with hope. Don't let your history keep you stuck in shame or regret. Don't let the mistakes of yesterday steal the miracles of tomorrow. You have a calling that transcends your past, a destiny that cannot be erased by failure or fear. Your past is a part of your story, but it is not the whole story. When you begin to see your history through the lens of God's plan, everything changes. The pain becomes purpose. The setbacks become setups. The failures become fuel for your future. God can turn your mess into a message that inspires, encourages, and leads others out of their own darkness. So many times people give up because they feel unworthy, unseen, or unloved because of their past. But I'm here to tell you that God's plan is bigger. His love is deeper. His grace is wider than anything you've done or been through. You're not outside of his reach or beyond his power. Your history might be loud, but God's plan is louder. It's time to stop living in the shadow of your past and start stepping into the light of your future. Your history doesn't have to define you. Your destiny will. So as we stand here today, remember this, your faith is a force far greater than the doubt that tries to shake you, far stronger than the fear that wants to hold you back. Doubt might be loud, but the truth of God's promises is always louder when you choose to listen. Fear may come knocking, but it can't stay where faith makes its home. And no matter what your past looks like, it's never bigger than the God who is writing your future. Your story is still being written. And with every step you take in faith, you push doubt and fear further away. You step into a purpose designed by a God who specializes in turning brokenness into breakthrough, silence into song, and waiting into victory. So walk boldly, speak truth over your life. Let your faith be louder than your fear. And know this, for every mountain you face, God's plan is bigger. Your history does not define you. Your faith and his promises do. Keep believing, keep pressing. Your breakthrough is closer than you think.